if I touch on some of the environmental side of things, because we're talking with Liz earlier, it's really important, I think, that it's understood that we are very keen to make it clear that we know that the air quality locally is getting better. It's getting better all the time. We want to make sure that it continues to get better, and I think the question is how quickly we can best make it better for everyone, rather than just debating about particular points in time. It has been improving, it will improve. The question is what's the best thing to make it better for everyone. And as many of you will know, a few years ago we were excited about ozone, then we're excited about carbon dioxide. I think the current flavour, I guess, is NOx. Particulate matter is frankly a real important one to get into. And I think as a nation, rather than focus on any one thing, we need to understand how we make the totality work better together. There's a piece around policy for the UK around that, but we're trying to make sure that we do the things that we can to move things forward. So we have put in place our own air quality strategy, and if anyone's interested, I've got some copies with me today. But we have a whole lot of monitoring in place on the port now, so we know what the story is in terms of a whole load of different emissions factors within the port, and we're happy with where things are, and we want to keep on improving it. But we are looking at how we have different tariffs for different ships to encourage more environmentally friendly ships to come to the port. Within the port, we are very rapidly moving to port vehicles being either electric or Euro 6 only. We now have ships coming to port, so the newest, if we think about the German ship that comes in every Monday or Tuesday, she has about 3,500 passengers. She's significantly bigger than the QM2, the Queen Mary II, and she uses less than half the power in port the QM2 uses, because she is newer and the technology behind what makes her run is so much more efficient. But also when she's in port, she runs on liquid natural gas, not on diesel, and so in terms of NOx and so on, it's a much better story.
We've had the IPCC report on the fact that we've got 12 years left to save the planet, and our grandchildren are going to be facing a really tough time because our political leaders are not taking the tough and brave decisions that we need. And it struck me that the port is an emblem of a lot of that activity, and it's a major challenge, I think, for ports worldwide, in that somehow or other you've got to get to net zero carbon by 2030. Are you monitoring that, and can you prove that you're going to get there?
The short answer is no, we can't prove it yet, and I don't know anyone who can anywhere. So what we are trying to do is to understand with so shipping globally is governed by the IMO, and we're trying to understand what their position is and how we can work with that. As you know, there are lots of different standards around shipping around the world, and we have some pretty damn stringent ones here, and we're trying to make it tighter. I think the test is, on the one hand, we have challenges around people who want, for example, locally, sustainable, affordable housing and so on. But the amount of carbon you consume in constructing a house is quite significant. So how do you reduce that? How do you make sure that you have ships which are A, have long life, but B, actually are either electrically powered and the electric they're running on is sustainable? And there are so many questions which I think as a nation we're about to wake up to. In terms of automotive activity, the projections we have for the volume of cars likely to be traded in the next 15-20 years which are electric are enormous. But many people will say actually electric cars are no good because they're appalling as well, for a whole host of reasons. And then what do you do with the batteries, and so it goes on. So I think we're going to have to get our heads around a whole load of things. Nuclear power, some would say it's fantastic because it's very clean, and some would say it's appalling because of what it does and what it leaves. So I'm not going to try and solve world hunger right now, but I recognise as an issue which we have as a nation got to address, and we want to play our part in that.
From what you were saying, with the increase in container traffic, that is going to make air pollution a lot worse.
So
those container lorries, when they're empty, when they go over a bump, the noise is just unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. But, I understand that we need the port for our economy, but it is at the expense of local residents' lives, in effect, at the moment.
Okay, so two things in particular, if I can. So on the noise piece, the particular piece that you mentioned about the noise is the lorries when they're empty, the skeletons sort of rattling away and so on. It's not in their interest to operate empty, so they want to operate container in, container out, and that's what they try to do. And what we're trying to do is to help to broker that to make sure it happens more and more and more, because it's in no one's interest to have empty trucks anyway. But I take the point that they're not silent, not suggesting they are for a minute. The piece about the pollution, the emissions, that there's probably two different things, which I'll mention if I can. One is the number of vehicles there are. The second one is the emissions per vehicle, if you like. And the particular challenge from, I think it's fair to say that the government and councils right now is around NOx, so nitrous oxides. I personally think it'll get more into particulate matter in due course, but the new cars and the new trucks are much better in terms of emissions than the older ones. And as we migrate to Euro 6 for diesel and Euro 4, I think it is for petrol, the emissions per vehicle are dramatically less. So you can have more vehicles and less emissions. However, the point is, how quickly can you migrate to those? In terms of the number of vehicles, that for me is the real challenge, because there will, just because of good engineering, there will be reductions in emissions per vehicle over the next few years, and there have been from Euro 2 and so on onwards. But in terms of the number of vehicles, what we're trying to do, and we have been doing, is investing in additional train paths to make sure that we can have more containers by rail than have been the case. And that's why we invested in improving the tunnels locally, why we invested in the port, our new rail facility, to make sure we can have ever more containers by train. That's our aim, so we take containers off the road where we can. And one of the aims of the Redbridge sidings project also is to make sure we can have more containers per train, which again is a good thing to do. So we're doing what we can. I accept it's not perfect, but we're trying to improve it.
I mean, what I would say is that if you reduce emissions by 20% and then increase the number of vehicles by 20%, it's a no-change situation.
But if we reduce the number of vehicles because of more trains, and if we reduce the emissions per vehicle, that's no bad thing.
Yeah, but you said the government won't let you use more trains.
Well, the point is that their policy is working against us, which is why we're trying to counteract that with other things. I haven't personally spoken about zero carbon with Michael Gove, no. Have we spoken as a business about a whole host of things we can be doing environmentally to really become the leading port organisation around the environment? Yes, we have. I think the challenge we have, and I take, there's no question that there's a very interesting balance we need to strike, I think, as a nation and so on. Personally, I think it's important that as a nation we trade, and I think it's important we find a way to do that in a way that's environmentally sensible. I think we need to make sure that the impacts we have are being properly mitigated and managed. So I mentioned earlier, for example, with the new car parks we're putting in, for example, we are putting in a lot of, no matter how much, but a lot of money to make sure that we are doing things in a way that actually reduce the impacts on the local residents. And that's a conversation I've had with them, and they've asked for that, and we've done it, and I think it's a good thing. If you look at, for example, at Ealing Wharf, the place we've just bought across the water, I think it's fair to say we inherited a site that was, frankly, pretty untidy, pretty messy, pretty ugly, and we did a number of things to improve it. I think we're good. There's one thing we did which we thought would improve things. Some of the local residents said actually it made things worse, so we reversed that. So we try to listen where we can, and we try to work with local residents. We have a port consultative committee made up of local councillors, local residents groups and so on, which tries to understand not only where the port's at, what it might be trying to do, but also to understand what we can do to make things better. We also clearly are, yes, we're a major employer, but our staff, we live in this city around here, and we all want to make it better for all of us. We spend a huge amount of time, individually or in company time, whether it's working in schools or it's working in wider charity areas and so on, trying to do our bit to help improve things because it's the right thing to do. But ultimately, at its simple form, I think there's probably a wider question for society about is the role of business, frankly, about providing jobs and what that brings, or is it about a whole load more? And we think there's a whole load more than just that, and that's why we're trying to play our part both environmentally but also in terms of the wider community. And there's lots more we can do around that, and we are doing. but we can never do enough.
Claudia's point about the lives of residents, and also the point made by the gentleman over here about air quality and how locally you state that it's going to get better. So I'm kind of interested in how you think that it is going to get better, considering the fact that Southampton water is one of the most polluted places in the UK, and you put some statistics up on the board about growth and how your projections for growth have actually exceeded what you thought was going to be that you published in the master plan. So I can't quite see how those two things go together, how air quality can improve when there's going to be exponential growth in the port, and how that's going to impact wards such as Redbridge.
Okay. If you can have a cruise ship that's double the size with half the emissions, I would say that's a bigger ship, more volume and less emissions. If you can have a cruise ship which actually is running on LNG, not on diesel, that can be an improvement. If you can run it on shore power, that can be an improvement if the power is sourced appropriately. So you can have growth and reductions. In terms of the work that we have been doing, you mentioned that Southampton water is one of the most polluted. Do you mean the actual water itself?
No, I mean the air.
Yeah. Oh, the air.
Yes, that's down to DEFRA.
Yeah, so fine. If you look at a long list of places, it's a long way down, but I agree, it's nothing like good enough. Nothing like good enough.
It's the second most polluted place in the UK.
Okay, let's do that offline, because I'll very happily debate that, but I don't think it's very exciting right now.
No, I think I'm asking you in the public forum because this is very relevant to this neighbourhood.
So you say it's the second most polluted place in the UK?
Yes, according to DEFRA.
Right, well that's not what they're telling me. So who in DEFRA and what's the number?
If you go to the website, which has the modelling, okay, the PCM modelling, don't get too technical.
So you're talking about NOx?
Yes.
Right. So this is the data that's saying, the council's data that's saying...
No, it's not council's data, DEFRA
okay.
data.
So the data that's saying, so my understanding is the council are consulting now, and we can debate the details around it, but the council are consulting now on the need to improve level of NOx in the city. You'll agree with that. There is one location the council are saying within their control which is going to be exceedance of the national objective or European objective in 2020. They are saying, not saying that's good enough or whatever, that's what they're saying, and that's one only. In Birmingham, there are hundreds of locations that will exceed this in 2020, for example. In Manchester, many more. So, I mean, the point is, what I'm trying to avoid, and Liz and I have this conversation, is I'm trying to avoid being too specific on where the issue is or isn't. My aim is to make sure we can keep on improving it, because that's what I think we should be doing.